Well, good morning, church. Looking at my teleprompter over there thinking, it's not on me yet. I was waiting. Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Those joining us online, want to welcome you. So appreciate you tuning in as we wrap up our Habits series today. Has anyone found this to be beneficial? All right, good. Good, man, that's exciting. This has been a great series. I'm learning so much just studying for it, listening to some new books, and really trying to wrap my mind around this, because I think if we went around the room and took a poll, the reality is that we all have pretty similar goals, right? Like we want to be healthy, we want to be financially free. If you're a follower of Jesus, then you want to be closer to God. But the truth that we all got to admit to is that we're experiencing vastly different results. We see some people who are just thriving and succeeding. They seem like they're successful at everything, and then there's the rest of us. And we're barely hanging on, wondering how on earth are they able to live that way. But nobody that I know, I can't think of a single person that I know, plans to live paycheck to paycheck, stressing over money. Right? You send your husband to the hardware store and he comes back with a truckload. You're like, Richard, what'd you do? That's not what you were supposed to buy. Your wife goes to Target. Your bank sends you a little notification. You saved $180 at Target. Saved $100? How much did you spend? That's the question. No one wants to live paycheck to paycheck, stressing about money. No one wants to become, overweight and have poor health and or be addicted and out of control and lose their marriage or break the trust of their kids. And even on just kind of a less crazy scale, I don't think anybody I know says, you know what, if I could just live a mediocre life, void of passion and drive and vision, and if I could just get to the end of my life and say, you know what, the one thing I do have is regrets. I don't know anybody that wants to live that way. None of us want to live that way. And the truth is this, is that we rarely end up at the wrong place because of one bad choice. We rarely end up at the wrong place because of one bad choice. It's usually a series of missteps, of bad choices, of bad habits that lead us to a place where we never thought we would be. Now here's what happens though. People will summarize those bad choices, that bad result, with a sentence. So they'll say things like, he battled with weight and died of a heart attack. Or she cheated on him and they got divorced. No one talks about like the late nights spent at work trying to finish a project or the rides to meet a client, the car rides together to meet a client. And no one talks about all of that. They just say this one sentence, and that wraps up that entire person's life, that bad choice. He just didn't follow through at work, so they let him go. They didn't talk about the fact that, his wife was sick or left him and he's trying to raise these kids by himself and he's been late to work. No one talks about that. They sum everything up in one sentence, and that sentence kind of summarizes all of those bad choices to get to that end result. And the funny thing is that we see the same kind of thing in Scripture. We see these kind of summary sentences where it just wraps up a person's life. In Judges chapter 16, verse 1 is one of those sentences. And it summarizes what became a series of bad choices, of bad decisions for Samson. Now, Samson, you need to understand, was born with incredible potential. There was not very many people who had the kind of God-given, innate potential that Samson had. Angel of the Lord shows up to Samson's parents. They're, kind of getting older, don't have any kids, tells them, hey, you're going to have a boy. He's going to be a Levite, separated unto God from his birth. I need you to do these couple things. God has set Samson apart, is calling him to rescue the nation of Israel from the Philistines. God fills him with strength and purpose. And yet, because of a series of bad steps, bad decisions, and bad habits, one day at a time, Samson ended up in a place he never thought he'd be. Judges chapter 16, verse 1 says this: one day, this could have been just a normal Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday. In the course of time, just so happened to be one day, Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza, and he spent the night with a prostitute. Just one day. This one sentence begins to summarize the rapid downfall of Samson. Now, I think his downfall even began probably earlier than this, but this is really like his life takes a turn for the worse after this moment, and it's just one day. Samson goes to the Philistine town and spent the night with a prostitute. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with your Middle Eastern geography, but the town of Gaza is the Philistine headquarters. The Philistines are public enemy number one. Remember that God, when he came and told Samson's parents that they were going to have a son, that this son was to be a judge and he was going to rescue the nation of Israel from Philistine control. Now we have Samson walking into the town of the people, the enemy that he was supposed to defeat, quite literally risking his very life. Now, Gaza is 25 miles from Samson's hometown, Zorah. It's not around the block. There's, back then, no such thing as Lyft or Uber, not even like those. My wife and I, we went to San Antonio. We were visiting like the Alamo and the Riverwalk. They have these cool things. You can rent like this scooter and drive it around. And then when you're done, you just park it and leave it. Someone else gets to take it. Samson didn't have that luxury. There was no motorized scooters to drive around. He is 25 miles away. And so however he chooses to get there, it's a bit of a journey. He has a little bit of a hike. And I wonder who would be stupid enough to risk so much for so little. To put your life in the very hands of your enemy for one night, the lady of the night. Who would be so stupid? And the reality is, people do it every single day, don't they? You guys have probably, you know somebody. You've heard the stories. People do this every single day. Now, presuming that Samson walked, which was a common means of transportation in his day, 25 miles equates to roughly, for the normal human, 56,250 steps. Now, if you're going at a leisurely pace, you're just taking your time, that's over 8 hours of walking to get from Zorah to Gaza. Over 8 hours, 8 hours, 20 minutes to be exact. If you're at just a normal human walking pace, you're at 6 hours and 15 minutes. If you are booking it, like he says, I got a hot date, I need to get there now. He's still 4 hours away from this town. 56,250 steps. And today I want to suggest to you that Samson didn't ruin his life just in one day, in one moment. Rather, he took 56,256 steps down a path that sent his life spiraling downward and out of control. He didn't get to a bad spot all at once, but it was one step, one bad habit at a time. And the same thing is true for us. Most of us don't wreck our life in a moment. It's one small step, one bad habit, one day at a time. Now, if you're interested in a peculiar case study, I would recommend that you read the rest of Samson's story. It begins in Judges chapter 13. And in his story, you'll see a steady decline that leads him down a path and to a place he never thought he'd be. Now, before we jump into how we get to the point where we can stop these bad decisions from robbing us of the life God created us to, let me recap. Week 1, we talked about who goals. Before we start worrying about what to do, we need to determine who is it that God has called me to be? Who do I want to become? And so maybe for you, that's a fully devoted follower of Jesus. That's a great who goal. You want to be a mom or dad who leads your kids well, leads your spouse well. You want to be an employee that just sets the example, right? That you don't work unto men, you work unto God. You want to set the example in faith and love and life and in purity. Those are the kind of people you want to be. On the podcast that's releasing this Wednesday, I had a chance to talk to Val sitting back there, and we got to talk about Val's who goal, who God is calling Val to be. I would encourage you, tune in. This Wednesday, it'll release at 5 a.m. You can listen anytime after that. But before we worry about what to do, we need to determine who we are. Who has God called us to be? Then in week 2, Pastor Tim taught us how to start a habit that leads you down the path of becoming the person God's called you to be. And he asked us the question, based on the person God created you to be, what one habit do you need to start? Not like a list of 5 or 10 habits you'd like, but what's one habit that you need to start that's going to move you in the direction of the life God created you to live? Today, I want to add another layer, and I want to ask you this question. Based on who you want to become, what one habit do you need to break? Based on the person that God has called you to be, what one habit do you need to stop? I love what James says about this. In James chapter 1, he says, therefore, ridding yourselves of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, humbly receive the implanted word which is able to save your souls. Another translation says it this way. It says, so get rid of every filthy habit and all wicked conduct. Submit to God and accept the word that he plants in your heart, which is able to save you. I think here we kind of get a 1, 2, 3 step plan for how to get rid of these habits. First, we get rid of the habit, the filth. We've got to get rid of it. 2, we submit ourselves to God. God, whatever your plan is, whatever you say, I'm going to submit myself under that. And I do that by accepting his word. Don't be transformed or conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I submit and I accept God's word. I allow it to transform my mind. James says this is able to save you. So what one habit do you need to lay down or get rid of in order to become who God's called you to be? So the question this morning that we need to ask then is, how do we break bad habits? How many of you have tried to break a bad habit before? How many of you were completely unsuccessful in that attempt? Right? That's the common story for us, isn't it? Like, I know that there's some habits. I know I need to get rid of them. I know I should stop doing this. And yet I just can't. I can't stop. We feel like Paul did the first week. If you remember, he's like, I don't want to do what's wrong, but I do it anyways. I want to do what's right, but I don't do it. Oh, what a miserable, wretched person I am. The first key, if you're taking notes, and how we break bad habits is we have to acknowledge it. You cannot defeat what you cannot define. Our Fresh Start meeting has been preaching this for years now, right? If you're gonna beat a bad habit, you need to define the bad habit. So maybe for you, your bad habit is your attitude, right? You got a critical attitude. Maybe you got a complaining heart. You're just constantly complaining, constantly nagging. Maybe you have a gossiping tongue. My mama would just say, that's a prayer request. You know what? I need you to pray about this. And then I'm like, are you sure? You just didn't want to tell me that? Maybe you have a gossiping tongue. Maybe for you, it's overeating, right? Like, I'm getting to the point, let me just be honest, I can't even have Oreos in my house. It's getting dangerous, right? Thank you, Dave. I'm not alone. Carrie in the back, yes. Can't even keep Oreos in the house. It's so dangerous, right? But maybe you have an addiction to sweets, chocolate, fast food, snacks. Did you know, as if coronavirus wasn't enough, like how much has the coronavirus robbed us from this past year, right? Like, I mean, we were all locked down. Now we're all wearing masks, and the Browns will be in the Super Bowl. Nobody is going to be allowed to go to the game. It's going to be unbelievable. Now, I saw a report, listen to this, I'm so upset. Ice cream from China, maybe not all of it, but some of it, is contaminated with the coronavirus. As if this virus hasn't robbed us enough, now it's stealing ice cream. How do we go on? If you thought this was going to be an uplifting sermon, you were wrong. There's no more ice cream, and I'm upset. I just bought some ice cream the other day. It tasted kind of foamy. And now I'm like, Joy, I think I got the Corona ice cream. This is not good. Maybe your addiction is digital, right? You're addicted to video games. Started out as just something fun to do, way to escape for a minute, but now it's controlling your life. You spend hours and hours and hours. Maybe it's social media. You can't get off, just scrolling through. You got to see what's going on. You got to look at everybody's post. You got to let everybody know what you're doing. And you have an addiction to social media. Maybe it's the news. Yeah, I shouldn't have gone there, right? We love it. We can't get enough. We have alerts on our phone that just suck us in. You would not believe what happened. And 20 minutes later, I talked to some people, and they've gone so far down the rabbit hole, I'm like, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. How did we get to this place? I looked at one person, I said, either these people are so crazy that we need to lock them in an insane asylum, or we need to go arrest everybody else. I'm not sure which it is, but this is so crazy. And we get so far down that rabbit hole, right? Maybe it's binge watching on Netflix, maybe it's porn, maybe it's just your mobile device. You can't even let somebody borrow your phone because you just feel like it's a part of you, and it would just cause you an anxiety attack. I know, for me, I've been trying to not wear my Apple Watch this past couple weeks since we started this habit series. It's been rough. My wife for years has been like, can you please just take the watch off? Because I have this if it buzzes, I gotta look. I gotta see what's going on. So I've not worn it. It's not even charged. Got a different watch on today and realized the battery's dead. That's what I'm doing today. But anyways, the first couple days, I'm not joking you, I wasn't wearing the watch. I would feel my wrist buzz. I'm like, it's not even there. Right? We have these sick addictions. Maybe it's substance. You're addicted to sugar, nicotine, prescription medication, alcohol. Listen, we have these things that we're addicted to that are robbing us of the life. I don't know what your bad habit is. One of mine was screen time. My Apple Watch, I've deleted Facebook off my phone, not because I care to see what people are up to. Honestly, I don't. I know that sounds horrible. I know that my mom, sometimes she'll share something. She'll be like, hey, did you see what I shared with you on Facebook? I'm like, nope, didn't see it. Why? Because I was in Facebook Marketplace. That's the danger zone for me. I could spend hours and hours finding all kinds of crap I didn't know that I needed. And then once you see it, you're like, I have to have that right now. Honey, get in the car. We got to go. We're driving to East Cleveland. I got to go pick something up. What are you talking about? Right? And so I was getting stuck in there, and it was stealing my contentment. I was no longer content with things because I'm like, man, look at all these cool things that are out there, and look how great of a deal it is. It's like I'm saving $1,000. Yeah, but you also spent $1,000. We had 1,000, now we don't. It's great that you saved 1,000, but we're still down $1,000, right? So I don't know what your addiction is. That's one of mine. But I wonder this. Have you ever wondered why it's so difficult for us to start good habits and to break the bad ones? Why is that so hard for us? If we know what we should do, if we want to do the good things, we don't want to do the bad things, why on earth is it so difficult? And I think this is important to discuss because it gives us some important insight on how we actually go about doing this. Here's the thing about good habits, is it usually starts off difficult. And the payout isn't until in the future, somewhere down the road, right? So you want to become healthier, so you say, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna start running, and you woke up today extra early because you knew you had to get to church, and you go outside and it's snowing, and you're like, what on earth did I get myself into? But you do it. You lace up your sneakers, you go for a run. You do that 3 days this week. Step on the scale, you gain 2 pounds. You're like, what on earth? This isn't working. But you keep doing that. 6, 7, 8 months down the road, you're gonna realize, oh my gosh, I'm healthier. I can breathe better. My energy levels are higher. I have more stamina. I'm healthier. But the problem was, right now, it stinks. And you're not gonna experience any of the benefits. You're just gonna be tired and exhausted and probably grouchy. 6, 7, 8 months down the road, you'll start to see it. But most of us can't hold out that long, right? Maybe you want to get more involved in the church, but now you got to get your kids up early. Your kids are crabby. You had to yell at them all the way to church, right? Last week, my cousins, Rachel and Megan, both worked in the nursery in the back. Then we went to my aunt's house for lunch after church. And my cousin's kids they were tired. You know, like if you have kids, you know what I'm saying. They were tired, just crying about everything. I looked at my cousin, I said, man, your kids are crabby today. She said, I know, I had to get them up for church. So you think like, yeah, I should get more involved in church, and you want to do that, and you wake up early, but man, your kids are just crabby. It's hard. It's hard. Your life hasn't radically changed just because you volunteered in the nursery, right? It's not radically different. The only difference is your kids are crabby now because you got them up early. But you keep doing that for a year, and now you realize, man, I feel like I'm closer to God than I've ever been. I feel like my relationship with my spouse is better. I finally have that peace that I've been looking for. I finally have an opportunity to use my gifts to make a difference and serve God's church. But the payoff doesn't happen in 1 week or 2 weeks or even 2 months. It's somewhere in the future. Bad habits are the opposite, right? Bad habits have an immediate perceived benefit. It's fun to do what's wrong, isn't it? Sin can be fun for a minute. Would you agree? Those of you who didn't raise your hand right there, I get it. You're in church. You don't want to admit to that. Right? Like sin is fun. No, don't you raise your hand. Right? Like sin's fun or we wouldn't do it. If sin was horrible, we wouldn't subject ourselves to that. So sin's fun or maybe you're just not doing it right. I'm not sure which one of those it is. But sin can be fun for a minute until it wrecks your life. It's fun until it's not, right? Because then it messes you up. But you sneak out for a smoke break and it relieves the stress, right? It's a busy day at work. Your workload's just out of control. The phone won't stop ringing, so you sneak out for a quick smoke break, and that's fine. And it's decades until you show up at the doctor and he gives you the bad news that you have lung cancer, right? In the moment, it was fine. Years down the road, you're going to pay the piper. Maybe you're the customer of the year at the all-you-can-eat buffet. You just love that. You got a plaque with your picture on the wall. Yeah, Corey, thank you. Eating all the sirloin steak you can, all the soft serve ice cream that your heart can desire, right? I mean, you're there. In the last church that I was at, one of my youth leaders when I was the youth pastor, every week took me to, I think it was Ryan's out in Sandusky for all-you-can-eat steak. It was great. It was great. So maybe you're that person. And that's fine, right? Like you do that for a month, and again, your life's not wrecked. It's not over. You're able to get up, do things, you can function, raise your kids, go to work, make money. And it's years before you're diagnosed with high cholesterol and diabetes, right? Like it's the payoff here is right in the moment. It's this momentary high, this momentary pleasure. As soon as I do this thing, I feel pleasure, I feel satisfaction, I feel joy or happiness. But years down the road, I'm going to look back and say, how on earth did I get to this point? This is what makes it also difficult. And understanding that helps us to know how we break a bad habit. Now, last week we said if a good habit's difficult to do at first, what do? Does anyone remember? We've got to make it obvious and easy, right? If you want to start a new habit, you have to make it obvious and easy. If we want to break a bad habit, then we need to do just the opposite. We need to make that difficult to do. If you want to break a bad habit, you have to make it difficult, because here's the reality for you and I, is we only have so much willpower, right? Like you can fight things off for a while, you can stick with something for a minute, you can say no for a week or so, but eventually what do? We break down, we get tired, we give in, don't we? Now we don't have donuts here. Coronavirus took our donuts too. But back in the day, we used to serve donuts. And maybe you said, you know what, I'm going to get healthy. I'm giving up donuts. I'm not going to touch donuts. The first week you come to church, and you see the donuts back there, you're like, I don't even need those donuts. Only stupid people eat donuts, right? You walk past it, feeling good about yourself. The next week you look at it, you say, God, thank you for those donuts that I don't even need, right? Thank you for them. By the third week, you're like smelling the donuts. You're just hanging out by the donut table, just trying to get close to the donuts. You just want to feel them, see what a donut feels like. You don't remember anymore. By the fourth week, you're like, okay, I'll grab the small donut. I'll cut it in half. And then once you eat one donut, now you've eaten four. Right? Because, you already blew it. Like, isn't that how we operate? Look at all those things that you've tried to do in your life, and by the time you, just give in, you're like, I go all in. I'm not in the kiddie section anymore. I'm right in the deep end. I'm just going to jump right into my misery. And we give in because we only have so much willpower. But listen to what Solomon said. Proverbs 4, he says this. He says, keep off the path of the wicked. Don't proceed on the way of evil ones. Avoid it. Don't travel on it. Turn away from it. Pass it by. Man, Solomon doesn't want us to miss this, right? He tells us 4 different ways. He says, you've got to avoid this. Don't travel on it. Turn away. Pass it by. If you want to break a bad habit, you've got to make it difficult to do. Difficult to engage in the habits that are destructive and holding you back. Last week, Pastor Tim showed us the habit loop. Have it right here, I think. Here's the habit loop. We have a trigger, and so maybe you're lonely, you're feeling bored. That triggers an action where now you're on Facebook and you're, surfing, or, maybe you're just, you went to a friend's house, they got a new TV. That's the trigger. Oh my gosh, I don't have a new TV. Now you're on Amazon searching for new TVs, right? So there's a trigger that leads to an action, and that action brings on a reward. We buy the TV, we set the TV up in our house. Now we're no longer jealous of our friend's TV. We feel better about ourselves. If we're going to break a habit, here's what we have to do. We have to remove the trigger and interrupt the action. This is how habits work. Every time you develop a habit, it's because there's a trigger that leads to an action that elicits a response or a reward. So if we're going to break bad habits, we've got to remove the trigger and interrupt the action. And so today I want to give you 5 major triggers to watch out for. I'm going to give you all of them right up front for those of you who are taking notes, and then I'll break them down. Here's the 5 major triggers. There's place, time, mood, moment, people. Place, time, mood, moment, people. These are what the smart people who write books about this stuff, this is what they say are the 5 major triggers. I want to start by talking about place and time because those kind of go together. There are probably certain places where you do certain things, and there's also certain places where you would never engage in that activity, right? Like you probably don't overeat at the gym. You're not sitting there on the bench press with a large pizza. Probably not doing that. You probably don't get high or drunk at church. It's probably a place where you would not engage in that sort of behavior. But you might go to your buddy's house after church today because the Browns are in the playoffs, and you might overeat and get drunk all at the same time, right? Because there's a time and there's a place that you engage in that kind of behavior. Maybe you don't look at porn at life group. Like that would be weird. Everybody's talking about the book of Judges, and you got your phone out. Like, that's not going to happen. Unless you're that one dude. Man, did you guys read that news story where, some news anchor guy was on Zoom, got busted, his screen, turned on or something? Bad news. So most of us don't do that kind of stuff. You would do that maybe late at night when you're bored, when you're alone, if you're mad at your spouse. In Scripture, we read of David and his encounter with Bathsheba. David made a horrible mistake that can be summed up this way: wrong place, wrong time. Scripture tells us that David was a man after God's own heart. And listen, making a mistake or falling into the same ruts over and over and over again, it doesn't make you a bad person. You can genuinely love God, but if you put yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, you might just find that you end up behaving and doing something that you never wanted to do. And Scripture tells us that in the springtime, when the kings go off to war, David was king of Israel. And in the springtime, when the kings go off to war, David did not. He stayed behind at the palace, strolled up onto the roof of the palace, looked out into the river, and saw a lady taking a bath. That trigger led to an action that gave him a reward that demanded a price that he never expected to pay. He would go on to kill her husband, murdering one of his best friends, all over this moment. Wrong place, wrong time. David should have been at war. If David was at war, this never would have happened. If David was in the place that he was supposed to be, this never would have happened. He's in the wrong place, the wrong time, saw something he shouldn't have seen, so he did something he shouldn't have done and paid more than he wanted to pay. The next trigger was mood. We're more vulnerable when we're in certain moods. Again, the smart people, they say that there's a couple different moods that trigger us when we're hungry, when we're angry, when we're lonely or bored, when we're tired. And they say that in those moments we should halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When we feel that way, we need to stop. We need to halt. Say, man, I feel kind of angry right now. I need to stop because I am more vulnerable when I'm in this mood. We're also triggered by moments. You do the same thing after a moment in time. Something happens and it generates the same response each and every time. So you get in a fight with your husband and then you call your girlfriends and have a man-bashing party. You just do it every time. Every time you guys get in a fight, you call your girlfriend, you call your mom, and you guys just bash your husband. That's just what you do, right? Maybe after the game, you go out for drinks. Just what you do. You flunk a test, so you smoke pot. You passed your test, so you smoke pot. You skipped your test, you smoke pot. You have a pot problem. That's the truth here. But the reality is there's moments in time that generate a certain behavior. We need to watch out because we're vulnerable in those moments. And this one is probably the toughest, is we're triggered by people. Studies are conclusive that the closer you are to someone, the more likely you are to imitate their habits. They did a study, one of the books I'm reading, they tracked 12,000 people for 32 years. That's quite the study, right? What they found in that study was the chance of becoming obese increased by 57% if you had a friend who was obese. But when one friend loses weight, other friends lose weight 1/3 of the time. So one of their 3 closest friends is going to lose a significant amount of weight as soon as one person in that friend group loses a significant amount of weight. Because we respond and act and behave like the people we spend the most time with. And the people we surround ourselves with shape the habits that we develop. Now, I didn't take this study to say that. Proverbs 13:20 said it a long time ago. It says, the one who walks with the wise will become wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. We become, listen to me, church, like the people that we spend the most time with, for better or for worse. The people you surround yourself with determine the habits that you develop. I remember the night at youth group when God called me. I was on the youth leadership team. I was playing on the worship team. I was doing all of these great things, but I was not following Jesus. And I remember my youth pastor preaching that night. I have no idea what he was talking about. But I remember I was sitting on the left side of the room, I think 3 or 4 pews back, because that church still had pews, which were great. You all don't know nothing about pews if you've not been in church a while. These chairs are awesome. I was sitting 3 or 4 pews back, and my youth pastor gave an altar call, and I could sense God calling me. I was like, God, I can't go up front. Like, I'm already on the youth leadership team. I already play guitar and sing. Like, there's no way I can go up. God said, Ryan, I want you to look at your friend's life and see where they're going 5, 10 years from now. And so I just began to look at the kind of lives that my friends were leading and said, man, where are they headed? And do I want to end up there? And that night I realized, man, that is not the person that I want to become. I believe that God has created me for so much more than that. Now, some of those friends have radically changed their lives and they're going on and they're doing great things. Other friends have been in jail. They have been in rehab. They're just struggling over and over and over again. And I could have gone down that path just as easy. But God woke me up that night, probably 14, 15 years old. Said, Ryan, are you sure that's the kind of person you want to be? Man, God, no. I believe you created me for so much more. And then I began surrounding myself with people who love God and love his church, who steward their resources well, who have great and healthy marriages. And my life has begun to follow that trajectory. Imagine how much easier it is for me because I have these kind of friends in my life, and how difficult it would be if the friends that I had closest to me were all, druggies or addicted to video games or partied, and we always went to the casino. Like, do you think that I would be the man that I am today if those are the kind of people I surrounded myself with? The people that we surround ourselves with, listen, determine the habits that we develop, and it is almost impossible to live the right life with the wrong friends. Listen to what Paul told the Corinthians. He says, do not be misled. I know you think you're smarter than this. I know you think you're stronger than this. I know you think you're better than this. Don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Bad company corrupts good character. You are not strong enough. If the people in your life are going down a path that leads to a place that you don't want to go, listen, you're heading that way. You're headed that way, whether you believe it or not. And if that's the case, listen, and this is why I said this one was going to be hard. It might be time to reevaluate those relationships. Now, if this is family, this gets even harder. I understand. You don't want to cut family off. You don't want to lock family out. You don't want to do those things. But some clear and defined boundaries need to be established. If it's family, I understand you want them to be in your life. You want them to be a part of your life. But you need some clear and defined boundaries in place, or you're going to go right off a cliff with them. So these triggers, the key is to remove the trigger and interrupt the action. So practically speaking, I know that was kind of deep, a little hard hitting, so let's be a little bit softer, a little bit more practical. If you struggle hitting the snooze button, anybody in the room? Okay, thank God it's not just me. If my phone, which is what I use for an alarm, is on my nightstand, I will snooze it endlessly. Doesn't matter how many alarms I have set, doesn't matter how many times I snooze, doesn't matter what's on the agenda for that day. I could have an appointment with the most important person on the planet. If my phone alarm is on the nightstand, I will snooze my way right through it. I have discovered that if I need to get up, I have to remove the trigger, which is my soft, warm bed, my deep love and affection for sleep, and I have to interrupt the action, which is reaching over and hitting the snooze button. How do I do that? I've had to take my phone and put it in a different room, which everybody in my house loves. They're all a fan of, I promise. That thing blaring in the morning, 6 a.m. They love it, right? But that's how I had, because now when I got to get up to shut the alarm off, I got to get out of that bed, walk across my cold house, go to the other room, and if it's really important, I put it all the way downstairs in the kitchen. Sorry, children. Whole house is awake now because Dad needed to get up. But I've had to interrupt that action, right? If you overspend on Amazon, you're just constantly buying, maybe it's time to give your friend the password to your Amazon account so you can't buy anything unless you call them and be like, hey, can you order me another one of those things? And they're like, really? You sure you need another one of those? Maybe your friend needs your Amazon password. Maybe if you find that you keep looking at inappropriate images on your phone, listen, it's time to lock down and get accountable. We're going to have a podcast about this topic in the coming weeks or months. Still working on a lot of that. But listen, your purity is more important. Your sanity is more important. It's time to lock down and get accountable. Now, sometimes we need to take drastic measures, right? If your problem is gambling, drugs, alcohol, sexual addiction, then it's possible that maybe you need to check yourself into a rehab, that you need to meet with a counselor, that you need to do something significant to remove the trigger and interrupt the action. And why resist temptation today? Listen, if you have the power to eliminate it. The very strength, the very power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you, Christian. Why put off to tomorrow what you can resist and defeat today in the name of Jesus? Church, the habits you have today will shape who you become tomorrow. And so here's my question. I'm starting to close, I promise. Do you like the direction your habits are taking you? Do you like the direction that your habits are taking you? And if you're in doubt, if you're unsure about that, listen, I want you to do the same thing that God asked me to do that night at youth group. And I want you to play it forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I want you to look at those negative habits you have, maybe those secret habits that you don't tell anybody about, maybe that habit that you've tried to give up over and over and over again. Maybe it's just that annoying habit. You know, it's not really bad, but it's just annoying. I want you to think about that habit. And I know right now it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. It doesn't seem like it's affecting anyone but you. No one's getting hurt but you. I want you to play that forward. And in the future, here's what you'll say. I never knew how much this would cost me. I never knew how much that would cost me. I never thought that I would lose so much. Man, I wish I had just spent more time with my kids. Man, if I only could have forgiven him, if I only could have forgiven her, maybe we could have had a relationship. Maybe we could have saved it. Now they're gone. Now they've cut me out. I wish I had never started. I had no clue it would ruin my life this bad. You'd say I'd give anything if I could go back in time and do something different, because I never expected to lose my family. I never expected to lose my home, my savings. I never expected to lose my reputation, my name. I never expected to lose so much. I just didn't know that the price was so high. So you didn't do it all at once. It was one small bad habit over time. So this morning, based on who you want to become, the person that God has called you to be, what habit are you going to break? And I know what you're thinking, because I've been there. I'm struggling with these thoughts right now. But God, I feel so weak. Right? I know I need to do it. I just feel so weak. God, I've tried before and I just failed. I don't know how many times I can give it over again. I don't know how many times I can say sorry. I don't know how many times I can pray about this thing. I don't know how many times I can ask for forgiveness. I've done it and it just hasn't worked. Good. Great. It's not just good, that's great. Because when you are weak, listen to me, Christian, Christ's strength is made perfect. God needs you to get to that place when you say, I can't do this on my own. I've tried so many times and failed, because now God gets the glory. Let his strength be made perfect in your weakness. Church, Scripture's clear. You're never tempted in any way that's uncommon. And your God is faithful to never let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, that he always, Scripture says, will give you a way out, a way of escape. So when you feel weak, know that he is strong. Christ in me is stronger than the wrong desires in me. Do you believe that? That Christ in me is stronger than the wrong desires in me. Samson took 56,250 steps in the wrong direction. But listen to me. Samson also had 56,250 250 opportunities to stop and to turn around. To say, this isn't who I want to become. This isn't the life that I want to lead. This isn't the legacy I want to leave behind. God has created me for something much, much more. He had 56,000 opportunities. Church, never underestimate how God can start something special. Band, you can come forward. Pastor Tim read this verse last week, and I want to close our series out with it today. Zechariah 4:10 says, do not despise these small beginnings. Just one habit to start, one habit to stop. It seems small, it seems so insignificant. There's so much of my life that I need to turn around. There's so much of my life that I need to fix and correct and straighten out. One habit to start, one habit to stop. Don't despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. It doesn't say that God waits to rejoice until you've got it all figured out, until the work is completed, until everything's finished and looks neat and is wrapped in a pretty package with a bow. The Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Church, imagine God in heaven rejoicing over you when you're faithful in the small things, when you're faithful in the little things. We're the creator of heaven and earth. This is way to go. You're on the right track. You stopped going in the wrong direction. And now you're being conformed into the image of my Son. Listen, church, when you do this, the evidence starts to build up that that's really who you are. Every time you work out, you're an athlete. It's not what you do, it's who you are. Every time you practice an instrument, you're a musician, right? It's not just what you do, it's your identity. Every time you wake up and you read the Bible in a year plan that we're going through, then you are a man or a woman of God. Every time you pray with your kids before they go to bed, you are a godly dad. And every time you serve, every time you give, every time you love, you are an ambassador of Christ. You're a devil-kicking, God-honoring overcomer. Yes. Today, it's time to decide who I want to become. Do you want to become the person that God created you to be? If so, what one habit do you need to start? What one habit do you need to stop? Church, I know the past few weeks has felt a little bit like a self-help seminar. But I wonder, what if these habits are robbing you of the life that you were created for? And I wonder, what could God do in your life and in your family? What could God do through you in your workplace, in your school, and in your community? If you got serious about eliminating these habits and started implementing the God-honoring systems that propel you towards the life you were created to live, how would your life, how would your legacy change if you determined to become the person God always knew that you would be?